Welcome to the Exeter podcast.
Morning, Phil. Absolutely delighted to have you with us on the Exeter podcast today. I know a reasonable about your journey, but be great for you to do an intro and tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, Rachel. My name's Phil. My background is as a software developer. So for the past sort of 25 years, I guess I've been really working with businesses, and it's always been businesses that I've been interested in. It's like, how can I solve a business problem or a real world human problem with software? And I feel like I've been able to do that quite simply. It's come easily to me. And I like the idea of being able to take someone's problem, understand it, put some form around it, and then deliver something that, creates some value. Because I love using, web apps and mobile apps. I love automation and the fact that things are so much easier than they used to be. I love sort of modern banking apps, for example, and the old way of doing things just continually frustrates me. That's kind of why I like doing what I do, and I feel like I've always been good at it. I've for most of my career I've had a job. I've been an employee. Around 7 years ago, with a colleague, we decided to set up our own agency and see if we could do this ourselves and just help any businesses that we could help. And I think that kind of brings me to really one of the sort of main learnings that I have from that whole experience, which is start with a plan. Define what your strategy is when you start a business. I suppose it's easy to say that now, but my real strategy at the point in time we started our company was to see if we could just pay our bills. It's like, can we make the break? Can we support ourselves?
I think that's everyone's strategy, Phil. When we first kick that process off, it's interesting. So it wasn't you weren't kind of driven to be an entrepreneur in the same way that we hear spoken about a lot on social media today. It was more about leveraging software to fix and solve a problem. And I'm from what you've said there, I'm guessing at some point you thought, why are we doing this for others? Why not give it a go ourselves?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Also, I'd like to be able to break rules where I think the rules are pointless and don't make sense. I've always been a rule breaker where appropriate.
You're in good company, Phil.
That hasn't always served me well. I didn't do so well at school. I got expelled from school. I'm not proud of that, but it kind of shows you what I was like as a teenager. I just sort of did what I thought was okay to do, even though that may not have been what was allowed. I didn't get in trouble with the police so much. Let's not get into that.
That's a different podcast, Phil.
But yeah, I think just that kind of, a fairly, I guess, fairly rebellious sort of approach, not just for the sake of it, but just why are you doing it like this? Why does that law exist? That law doesn't make sense. So there's a fairly kind of coherent argument against things.
One of the traits that I see with entrepreneurs all of the time is that rebellious. The rebellious nature, the questioning, the why, and we had a bit of conversation the other day. One of the Exeteers, James, and very similar story to the one you've just told. But I think if we were to look back, if I was to look back at my kind of schooling and growing up, I wasn't interested in the subject because I was told to be interested. If I was legitimately interested, then unsurprisingly, I showed up for it. But I, like you, I remember a teacher throwing me out of a lesson and saying, "Come back when you think you can behave," and I just cleared off because I knew I was never going to. And I thought that was a reasonable response to the situation. which is actually quite amusing, but it wasn't a reasonable response. But I think that style of learning, it isn't for all of us, and it's over time. I guess we learn, don't we, where our place is, where we're comfortable, and how we want to show up.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me started on the education system. It's I've got kids in secondary school, and one who's recently left. And yeah, there's an awful lot to learn about the real world outside of those pretty narrow subjects that they don't get taught, and that teachers may not even have had much experience of themselves. It's a difficult thing to change, and it's not going to happen overnight.
No, I agree. And talk to us a little bit about the company that you'd built then, Phil. So you were solving software, you were solving problems using software for clients. Were the clients public sector, private, SMEs? What was the makeup there?
Yeah, they were all private sector. I guess the sweet spot initially was really where you had an owner operator, solo business owner who you could get in the room with, look them in the eye, generate trust. They would say, yeah, I think these guys can do the job, and win a contract through that. And often, I mean, for starters, we're doing the work ourselves. We were the fee earners. But clearly you can't do that for very long. I mean,
Can't scale like that.
That's just burnout waiting to happen. And yeah, that's really my sort of closest call with being burnt out was when I was just, working pretty much every hour I could fit into the day, at a day rate, missing family holidays. That was not good. So yeah, scaling, removing yourself from day to day, one hire at a time. That was definitely, one of the major sort of tipping points is where you start to spend a minority of your time on fee earning work, and others are doing that for you, and you're starting to build a kind of repeatable process as much as you can. It was a tech agency, so every project was different, and so it's not a cookie cutter process.
But over time, as you say, you build a bit of a playbook, you have a bit of a knowledge base of, some of the, the component parts. We've done a bit of this before, or we've done a bit of that. And again, I share that similar journey with different. That was very much the approach and the fee earning bit for the first 18 months. I was, 80% billable, as well as trying to run the company. Yeah, we all do these mad things, don't we, at the start?
Yeah, I mean, I think building a team of different skills, that was the most kind of beautiful thing we did. I think you're bringing in people with very different complementary skill sets, and being able to offer that in a very small package that was accessible by smaller businesses, SMEs, some startups, where you might be able to offer a team of 5 or 6 different specialist skills, but perhaps only in a sort of 2 to 3 FTE per month. So You're talking about maybe you might have someone who's UI UX designer for a week, but then they drop off for the next 3 or 4 weeks. You might have someone who's a QA tester for a couple of days a week. You don't need a full-time person. It's a pretty good model. It's a good fit, I think, for business looking to build really top-end digital platforms without having to hire an internal team, use freelancers that have other distractions, bringing a team together who've worked together before, have a kind of way of doing it. Yeah, it was a pretty compelling offer.
And how did you balance that kind of bench cost? So the other side of the table, how did you balance having, because I asked that question semi-loaded because it was a challenge for me, but how did you manage making sure you had sufficient work for the permanent people that you were hiring?
Yeah, I mean, that is the major challenge. And I'm not going to say that I have a magic answer for that. And one of the things that I think we started to do was just dig our heels in around the size and the length of contracts. So, you see after a while that actually it's the smaller clients who are more cost conscious and have a smaller contract with you that actually end up causing you the most pain. And the larger clients, often actually are just easier to work with. Paying on time, and of course that's a big problem sometimes. And so and you can start to say, well, no, our minimum term is 12 months, not 6 months. This minimum team size is this. So you start to put in more commitment. And some people don't like it, and sometimes they fall by the wayside. But I think, you're setting yourself up for an easier life if you set your standards higher.
I wholeheartedly agree. And it's interesting, Phil. I sold my last business, an agency, back in 2020. And I was chatting to somebody in the last 24 hours where I was saying I wouldn't be building an agency today with the same balance of permanent heads and interims to what I had then. We were 70-30 ultimately, 70 perm. And I would be, much more core team permanent today, and I would be leveraging freelancers, but known quantities. But I would be a lot clearer on the playbook and how that delivery was happening, because the market has shifted and changed. And we can only, in my view, we can only talk about the success that we had at the time that we had it, because not every lesson carries forward in that kind of linear way. But I know utilization and bench is probably the single biggest challenge for growing a business like that. And where did the business get to from a kind of a size, from a people perspective, and also impact in way of clients that you were working with?
Yeah, in terms of the head count, we were over the sort of 50 mark last year. So to the point where you kind of walk in the office and you're like, you sort of, there was a point where I would sort of say goodbye to people, that I would shake everyone's hand as we sort of, as I went home, years ago, pre-COVID. And I sort of wondered, at what point that would inevitably have to stop. And I remember sort of walking to the office sometimes, and there's those sort of new hires, and you're like, oh, who are you? And there's been brought on, and you haven't been involved in the hiring process. And so you go and introduce yourself. So where it's and that's a sign of it having a life of its own, which is such an important part. But we started to work with bigger and bigger clients. But if I trace back the biggest clients, they actually often came out of a fairly innocuous conversation, meeting, relationship, that maybe a couple of hops from there, and maybe 3 years later, resulted in someone referring you to somebody else, and that becoming your biggest client. So it's funny how things come around. It's not always the biggest companies you work with. In fact, that we did work with a very large company, a household name company. And when we landed them, we thought, wow, this is it. This is our springboard now. And it came to nothing, and we just had very little work out of them. And eventually we just declined to work with them because they weren't offering us the terms that were acceptable to us. So we actually took the hard decision to cease the contract.
It's funny, isn't it? Because there is that assumption, and I agree. In way of some of the the business that we developed over the years, it wouldn't have been intentional business development in that way. I often find if I was speaking at an event, that it would spark a conversation, and that would move some of that stuff forward. It's not dissimilar for the grafter now, but I think that assumption of they are a massive entity, therefore we're going to clean up in way of the amount of work we're going to do for them. We had a similar thing around, we built the COVID home testing service during COVID for the UK, and trying to get into Department of Health was really tricky. The arm's length bodies, the smaller entities, fine, but trying to get right into the centre was hard. And I too had that view. It was, we're off. That wasn't the case. I mean, we're bloody lucky we got that, that work paid for in the end. but that was the joy of the COVID era. But it's interesting that kind of journey, and from a this is a hard one, but from a reflection over that building and then selling the business, what are your three key magic kind of moments on that journey?
I think, that first point I mentioned around what is your strategy, what is it you want to be doing? It's funny because no one really ever asks you that when you tell them about your business. Whereas I'm now involved a little bit in the property investment space. And that's typically one of the first questions anyone asks. They say, what's your strategy? Because it's such an important question. It's like, what are you trying to get out of this? Why are you doing it? What is your plan? And no one really ever asks you that in a business, or they rarely do. But clearly, for businesses that are established, that is such an important question. It's where is this going? Is it going to be a low-level lifestyle business? Do you just love what you do and you're happy just to spend your time doing it? Have you built yourself a job you don't want?
Yeah.
It's such a common pitfall. People end up doing the things they can do, but they've already had a job doing that. And actually having a job you've built yourself that you have all these other responsibilities for as well, and you have to work the weekends and you have to do sales as well, it can weigh you down. That's a tough place to be, unless you've got great revenue and you can take lovely holidays and you can employ people to do all the things you don't want to do. That's a difficult spot to be in.
Yeah, that takes time. I mean, however good and experienced you are, that still, in my view, takes time and doesn't happen overnight. If it did, there'd be more of us thinking we could.
I think that another one of the big learnings is just don't do it yourself. You may be a solo business owner. There are lots of figures around the relative success of scalability, of raising funds, of selling businesses, where you have 2 to 3 co-founders working together. I know from my own experience that my last business would never have been the same size or half the size. Again, it was two co-founders. It was definitely a lot bigger than double the size it would have been with one of us, I'm sure. It's not only the size, though, it's also just the journey. It's when you're in a difficult spot, it's so much easier to have a huddle with your co-founders. Okay, what are we going to do here? You're not alone.
Was that a huddle or a cuddle, Phil?
Yeah, maybe a cuddle sometimes. maybe that would do you best. And sort of lowest point, you need someone you can trust. Clearly, you need someone who you know is going to behave, react in a certain way in difficult times. Those can be pretty testing. And I think if you're on your own, though, if it is just you as the business owner, I would definitely say you must seek out mentorship, networks, peer groups, a board, some objectivity, and someone who can ask the tough questions, and get you to step out of your day to day. I found that we had a board early on. The people who made up that board, they did vary a little bit, but effectively it was someone who was from a growth agency, so they had a sales background and positioning. Someone who'd exited an agency already, built an agency in a different sector, in design, but still very relevant to what we did, and also a fractional CFO. And used to come out of those meetings feeling really energized, thinking, wow, it's so much, I feel really good about the future now because there's been this really useful review from someone who's not in the weeds like we are. And often, sometimes it would be, well, we've got a lot of work to do and there's some really difficult stuff ahead, but often I would feel really positive about what we've done and what we were facing.
It's what you just said reminds me of that quote. That a miracle is a change in perspective, and I think that's what for me. I had an advisory board with different, and we put a board in place for the grafter way before we've needed because I actually like the challenge, but it's the different views and it's the different ways of looking at stuff, and making sure that you're dragged out of the business as usual. I had a great people director years ago who said every minute, Reg, that you're messing around, diving back into delivery, or solving a business development drama, you're not actually doing your job. And that kind of moment of, I had dinner with her last night actually, but that moment of sort of holding up the mirror and hearing that gives you some pretty frank perspective as well. I just want to tease into something you've said there around that kind of solopreneur bit. There's so many different views around business partners. I have views myself around the pros and cons of it. I think we're heading into a world at the minute where we're about to see many more businesses of the solopreneur variety because of the use of AI and being able to access support internationally around some of those back office roles as well. So I guess my question is probably around the choosing of the business partner. It feels like that was quite a conscious choice. And my question is, were you complementary? Were you opposites in way of how you approach things? There's a smile there, Phil. So
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say that I was extremely fortunate in my business partner Darren. Was a guy that I'd worked with as a colleague for a couple of years. I remember when I interviewed him for the job that he actually took at the company we were working at. I said, "That's the best interview that anyone's ever done." Literally, it was just like the amount of research, the way he presented himself, his background knowledge. He'd obviously gone to such a lot of effort. I was really impressed. He knew more about the company than I did. Like he would,
I love that.
I thought we have to hire this guy. He's a real high performer, but also, very, very trustworthy, which really cuts above everything else. I mean, if you're trustworthy, you can be depended upon, especially when times are tough. That's just massive. In terms of skill sets, I mean, I think we started off pretty similar. We were both from a software development background, both probably describe ourselves as being, fairly introverted. He's the CEO of Clear Sky and its mouthpiece, and was very good at that. He's very good at that still. Sorry, he's still in that role, and really good at bringing people together. And I've been, I guess, more of a sort of technical, solution focused person. And so, we became, I think, quite complementary skills. We split our roles into CEO and CTO after a year or two, because we were both sort of generic directors for a while and doing the same sorts of things. I think it was a really good thing to do that, though. It did clarify things. But I was very fortunate, I think.
It definitely helps. Interesting, there's so many different schools of thought, and for me personally, I absolutely felt I needed and wanted a business partner with the first two companies. Strangely, this time I didn't. I was talking about this at length yesterday, and I don't know whether that's that I think there was an element of not wanting to do it on my own. Previously, I wanted the sounding board, and I guess this time round, either I think I'm going to get that sounding board from the Exeteers that we're working with, or I'm just confident enough to go, let's have it. Let's see how it plays out.
Probably a bit of both, isn't it? You've got a really good group around you, but you've also got the hard yards that you've put in.
I think so, and the other bit is I'm lucky. I use the term loosely, that the team are very vocal in way of feedback. So we don't have a it's very, if something isn't feeling right, let's have that conversation, which I think helps as well around some of that. I want to move on and talk a little bit about your exit from Clear Sky and just understand a bit around that process. How did that kind of come about? I mean, mindful you may not be able to or want to share all of the, the confidential commercial stuff in that space. But whatever you are comfortable sharing would be very interesting to hear about.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I suppose that the first thing is that for some time, the plan had been to exit the company at some point, whenever that is. So, years down the line. I suppose what we did then was build the structure around the business, the documentation, the processes, the management accounts, that board, the projections for revenue, all of the grown-up things that a business should be doing to have scrutiny applied to it, that allow you to either attract investment, attract partners, or to sell the business. And so the situation happened where there was actually an interested party who wanted to own a proportion of a business like Clear Sky to do interesting projects, to use as the basis to develop products into the future. And so it was put to me, because of my advanced years compared to my co-founder, that I might be more...
They don't look too advanced, Phil, but anyway, we digress.
Well, thank you. That, I may be more interested in an exit than my co-founder. And so, discussions happened, and then relatively quickly we came to an agreement, and I was able to step aside whilst essentially selling my share of the business. I still retain a proportion of it because I still have a belief in the business, and I'm very glad that that's the situation. But I was able to resign from my role and take a payday, and I mean, that's certainly nothing like that has ever happened to me before, and it was a difficult process because it's kind of unpicking yourself from something that you're heavily embedded in and emotionally invested in.
Yeah.
I mean, I was surprised. It took me by surprise. I ended up in tears just on my own, but I was actually in tears when I after announcing this to the team, I thought, wow, this has really taken it out of me.
I think people, thank you for sharing that. I think people really underestimate the impact it's going to have. When I did the call with the team at Different to say I was selling the business, I was exactly the same. And we were selling to a listed business, so I had to do those calls individually after 5 p.m. so we couldn't affect share price. And I can still, have a physical reaction in my body to you saying that, because I can still feel that. And we're human. And that's, that is an obvious reaction, really. But I'm not sure any of us legislate for it in quite that way. And how have you found it during that kind of exit process, and how have you found it in the last few months?
Yeah, during the process, it was pretty stressful. I took a step back from day-to-day business operations for what ended up being a few months, like 2-3 months. I couldn't really say anything to the team, so I had to.
That's hard.
I had to just kind of avoid conversations, and it was difficult. And inevitably, you're thinking, is this going to happen? Is it not going to happen? But it wasn't an easy time. But afterwards, I just had to take some time off and just let things sort of settle before I really knew what I wanted to do. And actually, it was a few months where I was kind of pretty directionless. And I thought it was okay. I mean, no one's going to feel sorry for you, right? Because you've just been paid a bunch of money, and life's kind of suddenly become a lot easier. in that respect. Yeah, it's still people need purpose. People need to get up in the morning to do something. Everyone needs that, and I guess that wasn't the easiest thing. But now I'm I'm doing a number of different things, and they're different, and I'm interested in everything that I do, and I have a clearer purpose.
Yep.
So I can say what my purpose is, what I want to be doing, what I don't want to be doing. And that sort of clarifies the things I should choose to do and the things I shouldn't choose to do. So that's kind of good. That's a nice place to be.
It's a real positive coming out of it. And would you, if you were offering advice to somebody who is planning to go through an exit process, what would your advice be around preparing for that kind of emotional impact?
I would say get people around you who've been through this already. I think that really is the best thing that you can do, because it's not usual as a first-time business owner. You'll probably know lots of other business owners just by if you have a B2B business. Many of them won't have been through that themselves. Most of them will be business owners who are earning a living, and they have the same sort of day-to-day concerns that you do, but they may not have been through that process themselves. I think it's not to be underestimated how big an emotional distraction it can be. So from running the day-to-day business, that could be catastrophic, I think, if you're not careful. I really think having a strong group that you can refer to, whether that's a board, whether it's non-execs, whether it's some external body, or a network, I think that's really important. It's such a unusual process to go through. It's nothing like running a business or doing like myself. I'm a sort of technical person in a particular role. Now running a business, exiting a company is nothing like that. I mean, one of the things, being faced with a sort of 100-page document which you're supposed to sign, going through and changing on the odd word here and there and the odd number, and sometimes doing the due diligence yourself that your solicitor's supposed to be doing on your behalf. That's no fun. No one wants to be doing that. So I think you just need help. You need someone to speak to, because otherwise you could kind of go slowly mad, I think.
I wholeheartedly agree. And the story that I often tell, Phil, is, post my exit, I remember feeling very emotionally all over the place, kind of bereft. And I was in an earnout at that time as well. But my mates come from every walk of life. So what I couldn't do is pick up the phone and go, I'm feeling a bit low with an 8-figure exit, because I can assure you,
who's going to feel sorry for you? Like, they're going, "Oh, pull yourself together. If only I had that opportunity. Come on."
Yeah.
First world problems, isn't it? It's
or slightly more colourful language, actually, judging by some of my mates, Phil. But yes, I agree. And I want to just pivot slightly. And talk about for a couple of minutes, being an entrepreneur in the UK right now, which is one of my favourite topics. But what are your thoughts on how things are kind of unfolding here, and the opportunity, some of the challenges? I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I suppose the first thing is, we're very fortunate to be in the UK, which has, a first world country. There's plenty of opportunity around. As people say, this is the best time to ever be an entrepreneur. With the web, AI, you can get things done quickly and cheaply. You can you've got the whole world as a marketplace. So opportunity is everywhere. There's no shortage of opportunity. But I suppose the operating conditions of the UK, without wanting to become political, it does feel to me that entrepreneurship isn't encouraged in the UK. And by being an entrepreneur, you're kind of swimming against the tide. It feels that you're supposed to have a job, and that job is supposed to provide you with what you need. Clearly, entrepreneurship is the basis for all generation of cash, of money. Entrepreneurship creates jobs. As like the company that I co-founded employs 50, 60 people. Okay, that you could argue, well, they'd be working somewhere else, but they'd be working somewhere else in another entrepreneur's company. So there are entrepreneurs, the people who start this stuff, who create it, who create wealth. Bringing people to the UK, attracting them through opportunity. The reason that people go and skill themselves up to earn money in skilled roles. I mean, that's what I did. And so, looking at the policies that are being introduced in the UK, it feels that the sort of encouragement to be an entrepreneur just seems to be getting kind of whittled away, and it just gets a bit harder at each time a new policy comes out. And there are people who talk about millionaires leaving the UK for elsewhere. Having just come back from a trip to Australia and Singapore, I think one of the things that struck me was just the amount of wealth and opportunity outside of the UK.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, there is enormous wealth, beyond these shores. And I think, if you're in the UK, you can be forgiven for thinking that the UK is kind of like a big part of the world economy. And as soon as you get out of that, you realise it's not. And so, there are lots of opportunity. Whether the government really supports that, whether they ever will, remains to be seen. But the short answer is that there's always opportunity, and there's adversity out there. But I guess no one goes into entrepreneurship as the easy option. It's not the easy option. It's for a sort of fairly bloody-minded person.
I wholeheartedly agree with that on both counts, actually. I think I often liken entrepreneurship to getting paid for one job while doing 15, and there is there's a potential payday at the back end of that if you do it right, if you've got a fair bit of luck on your side. I do think it's a tricky economic market at the minute, and I don't believe that we're in the best place around being able to leverage not just the opportunity, but also some of the positivity. It feels quite a negative place to me, building a business in the UK at the minute. And that's not, jumping straight onto the I must go to Dubai wave, which is doing the rounds at the minute. But it is, I guess, for me personally, we're in the States in a week's time, and we're exploring how can we, take our service out to an international market. And the phrase you've just used, the whole world as a marketplace, has never been more true. And so I think there's huge opportunity there. And the reality is, as entrepreneurs, we have to just navigate around the obstacles that come our way. It's an interesting place.
There's enormous disruption just happening now, as we know. I mean, AI is just changing everything. Every day I happen upon another piece of information, thinking, wow, someone's doing that with it. Wow, that means that whole industry is just going to be disrupted. It's amazing. I mean, I can't really predict the next few years, but all I know is things are going to change a lot.
I saw a post yesterday about a chap who was Big Four and has now built out a consultancy play going after the Big Four, leveraging AI, and is already kind of paying dividends. And I had dinner with a mate last night, and I said the challenge we've got at the minute is every single day it's moving and changing. It's the same as looking at lead gen for the grafter at the minute. We couldn't place bets in one area to generate leads because they'll be out of date within a quarter, and that is wild. It's exciting, but it is incredibly chaotic, fast, and loads of businesses are not grasping that opportunity at all. So I what a time to be with your skill set, I think, Phil. Very interesting times.
Yeah, certainly is.
So I'm going to kind of bring it to a close. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your journey and your thoughts. And if people want to reach out and have a conversation with you, where do they track you down?
Sure. Yeah, that's good. I love speaking to people, actually. Even though I describe myself as an introvert, I always like to speak to business owners, people who've got great ideas. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place. So it's Phil Telfer. I don't know if there are any other ones, but clearly we're connected on LinkedIn, so that might narrow it down.
We will share your contact details. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Phil. Really appreciate your time.
And thank you. Thanks, Rachel.